can't take that in the wagon.
I can't? Why not?
There's no room. We already got a dame in there who's raising the roof.
A dame?
Yeah, a blonde. Plainclothesman picked her up trying to buy a gun without a permit. She keeps screaming she's going to miss her date with Ducky.
You have just heard X-1, presented by the National Broadcasting Company in cooperation with Street and Smith, publishers of astounding science fiction. Tonight, by transcription, X-1 has brought you A Logic Named Joe, adapted for radio by Clarice Ross from the story by Murray Leinster. Featured in the cast were Mandel Kramer, Wendell Holmes, Guy Rep, Bill Zuckert, Walter Kinsella, Bob Hastings, Joseph Julian, Joey Fallon, Mary Lou Forster, Ann Thomas, and Mary Patton. Your announcer, Fred Collins. X-1 was directed by Daniel Sutter and is an NBC Radio Network production.
Next week, X-1 will bring you a dramatization of Robert Heinlein's famous science fiction masterpiece, The Roads Must Roll. It concerns the day when traffic became so impossible that the engineers took over and banned all automobiles, tore up the superhighways, and built huge mechanized roads which whirled along on giant rotors at speeds up to 100 miles an hour. An engineering miracle changed the face of the nation. The rolling roads took over. No one worried about the fact that if the road should stop, our whole economic life would fall apart. The machinery, they said, was perfect. But they forgot that machinery depends on men, and men are not perfect. Be sure to tune in next week at a new time, same day, for another exciting broadcast of X-1. But to get back to present-day problems, are you hitting the highway this weekend? Will you be visiting your family and friends? Are you going to make sure it won't be grief and pain you'll bring to yourself and your family? Decide now that you and your family will have a pleasant holiday, not a painful future. By driving with care, you're sure to get there, so take it easy on the highway this weekend, won't you? Don't let death take your holiday. New Year's Classic, Michigan State versus UCLA at the Rose Bowl on NBC Radio.
Well, folks, that was X-1 and A Logic Named Joe, aired on December 28, 1955. Hope you enjoyed the program. It really reminds you of today's virtual assistants, Google, the Echo devices, Apple, stuff like that. And it was in 1955 that someone thought of this, or maybe even 1950. Wow. Well, folks, let's take a break and give away a prize. Stay near the computer, and when you hear your name called, answer as soon as you can, because if you don't, you'll miss out. I'll see you in a few minutes for our second program. See you soon. Well, folks, it's time for my second show, and I think you're going to like this one. What if the machines actually were intelligent enough to ruin our lives and cause us to have a nightmare? Well, here is our show from X-1. It's Nightmare, aired on July 21st, 1955.
Countdown for blast off. X-5, 4, 3, 2, X-1, fire. From the far horizons of the unknown come transcribed tales of new dimensions in time and space. These are stories of the future, adventures in which you'll live in a million could-be years on 1,000 maybe worlds. The National Broadcasting Company, in cooperation with Street and Smith, publishers of astounding science fiction, presents X minus 1. Tonight's story, Nightmare, a story based on the poem Revolt of the Machines by Stephen Vincent Benet.
Nobody knows exactly when the nightmare began. They must have planned it for years, though, because looking back, you can find little incidents here and there. Like the concrete mixer in New Jersey that killed the Italian bricklayer, and the time Senator Milburn was sucked into the rotopress at the Capitol office building. Unrelated accidents, we thought at the time, but they add up now. The day we really should have suspected was when the men walked off the construction job at the new Brookmeadow atomic pile on Long Island. I'll never forget that day. I was working as a statistical clerk in the project then, operating one of those miracle computing machines. They called it ENIAC.
Mr. Gurney,
Yes, Bella?
the chief wants to see you in his office.
Me?
Unless you are no longer Samson Gurney, he wants to see you.
Oh, thank you.
Come in.
You wanted to see me, Mr. Hawk?
Gurney, I thought those electronic computations were infallible.
They are, sir, but...
We've got a kickback from the chief physicist. These nuclear fission equations are inaccurate.
Well, sir, you know the computer is a highly complicated machine, more complicated in many ways than the human brain.
I'm not interested in the physics of it. Can something go wrong?
Well, occasionally, if there's an overload, the machine goes haywire. Sort of has a nervous breakdown, you might say. We usually rest it up for an hour, and it's okay again.
Well, do whatever has to be done.
Yes, sir.
And, Gurney,
Yes, sir?
you've been with the Bureau for over 15 years now. It would be a shame to have to remove you because you aren't keeping your mind on your work.
Mr. Hawk, I assure you...
Excuse me. Hawk speaking. What? They've what? All of them? Well, have you tried to talk to them? Oh, yes, of course. I'll send one of the safety engineers over. Place is falling apart piece by piece. Miss Roscoe, the men of the construction gang of the new building have walked out on us. They're complaining that the job is jinxed. Someone slipped this morning and fell into a turbine.
That evening, out of that morbid curiosity so peculiar to the human race, I wandered over to the site of the new atomic pile to see where the man had fallen into the turbine. They had the construction area fenced off with barbed wire, and a security guard stopped me.
Hold it, buddy. You can't go in there. That's a restricted area.
I'm Samson Gurney from the statistical section. Here's my identification.
I'm sorry, Mr. Gurney. Nobody's allowed in the area.
I see. Tell me, was he, killed instantly?
Like that. This guy was checking a magnetic field inside the turbine. All of a sudden, for no reason at all, the turbine starts up. Bzzz, and it's over. 3 days ago, a bulldozer starts up by itself and runs wild. Go figure it out.
I'm a statistician. All my life I've been interested in statistics. So a simple-sounding thing like this started me off. I went back to the office that evening instead of going home, and for the next 2.5 hours, I computed statistical figures on the probability of industrial accidents for the types of machines we were using. I took one look at my figures and went down to Hawk's office.
Oh, what is it, Gurney? I'm very busy.
It's urgent, Mr. Hawk.
Well,
It's about these industrial accidents we're having, Mr. Hawk.
what about them?
Mr. Hawk, in the past 3 months, industrial accidents all over the country have taken a sharp, unexplained upswing.
Nerves.
we've had a 100% increase over normal for this project alone.
What?
Here are the figures.
Oh, now, Gurney, this is impossible.
It seems to be, and that's why I have a theory, sir.
What's that?
Sabotage.
Gurney, why don't you stop playing FBI man and stick to your job? Which, incidentally, you haven't been doing too well. You and your computing machine have made mistakes before, and this fantastic figure is probably another. I'll have Miss Roscoe show you. What's the matter with this blasted buzzer? Miss Roscoe! Miss Roscoe!
Yes, sir.
Stop this blasted buzzer. Get a repairman, a mechanic, anything, but stop the thing. And you, Gurney, get out!
I went back to my office to get my hat and coat, feeling about as unhappy and humiliated as a man can feel. The office was dark and deserted. The whole building seemed oppressive and unnatural, as if some evil force were pressing down on it. I walked across to my desk. In front of me, the ENIAC glowed and chattered eerily as it worked on the equations we had fed it that morning. Its many-fingered circuits hung against the wall like some great octopus, and the thousands of tubes glowed orange and blue in the dark like 1,000 globing eyes staring at me. It almost seemed alive. It increased its tempo a moment, and a fleeting notion crossed my brain that it was laughing at me. Laughing like all the others. What was the matter with me? I shut my desk drawer and began to put the cover on my electric typewriter when an amazing thing, the most amazing single incident of my life happened. Alone in the darkness, with no one at the keyboard, the electric typewriter began to type. Am I going crazy? This can't be. There's nobody there. There's nobody there. Oh, no. I just imagined it. It's in my mind. But I hadn't imagined it. The paper was there on the carriage. Did I dare read it? Or would the whole thing suddenly vanish and send me shrieking to the nearest psychiatrist? I removed the paper from the machine and read. Samson Gurney, there are some questions better left unsolved. The answer to yours is death.
Gurney, do you expect me to believe this? It's insane.
Mr. Hawk, I'm as sane as you. I'll submit to any psychiatric examination you choose. That typewriter wrote this message by itself.
Then this is just some practical joke someone in the office is playing.
There was no one in the office.
Oh, of course not. They wired up the machine and left.
I checked the machine myself, Mr. Hawk.
All right, Gurney. You leave this note with me, and I'll turn it over to the security force for further investigation.
But...
No buts, Gurney. The security men will handle it.
Yes,
And now, you just relax for a few days. Everything will turn out all right. The main thing is not to let little things upset you.
It was what Hawk had said about little things that gave me the idea. For the next week, I observed the 1,000 petty little annoyances around the office. The door handle that wouldn't turn. The telephone connection that cut off in the middle of an important call. The power failure for no explainable reason. I watched the newspapers, too, reading about industrial accidents, failures of important machinery. It seemed absurd. Men had created machines that were almost perfection in themselves. Machines that could actually think and compute fabulous equations. And yet the failures went on. I, Samson Gurney, an unimportant clerk in an unimportant job, knew that I had stumbled onto a secret so monstrous in its implications that I was almost afraid to pursue it. On October 12, 1956, I established communication with them. I will curse the moment to my dying breath.